So we're talking fat loss after 40, and you may have noticed the word steroids in the title, so let's address the elephant in the room. Please do not think I'm about to start telling you to inject yourself in the butt every Monday morning. But here's the thing. During one of my regular internet reading vortexes, I read about a common dosage protocol popular with steroid users called blast and cruise. And this was a real light bulb moment for me that I wanted to share with my fellow guys over 40 who are trying to lose a little bit of weight but are finding it tough. Because we can apply this same protocol to fat loss after 40 just without having to ask that sketchy guy at the gym about his pills and potions. Hey, Chris here from Over 40, freaking awesome, helping get guys 40 plus fitter, slimmer, healthier and happier in sustainable ways, and certainly not by jumping on steroids. So today we're talking fat loss after 40 and how we can steal a tactic used by steroid users to speed things up without much disruption to our lives. So let me explain first how blast and cruise works for guys on steroids. Then we're going to do a deeper dive into how we can use the protocol to lose weight from your belly, your chest, your face, or wherever you want to lose it. So guys will blast with a large dose of testosterone or whatever steroid that they are on in the short term. Then they'll back off and they will cruise at a much lower dosage in the longer term. So steroid users following this protocol are kind of always on steroids with this blast and cruise approach. And that contrasts with the other common protocol that guys might use of cycling, where they are on with a medium dose and then off with zero dose, and then they have to contend with all sorts of side effects caused by their body's natural testosterone production having been completely shut down. Now, during this short-term blast with a big dose, the body is under a lot of stress, but that's only for a while because the cruise part then allows the body to recover while still keeping testosterone at healthy increased levels. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, that's all very interesting, but how the hell does this relate to fat loss after 40? Well, instead of thinking of a dose of steroids, let's think about a dose of calorie restriction, the amount under your daily metabolic rate that you try to eat during a diet when you're trying to lose some body fat. Now, losing weight is a bit tougher after 40, and we've all experienced diminishing returns from our diet efforts. Something that once worked seems to no longer work, and this is normally when we will grumpily come off whatever diet we were on. What happens here? Well, the body adapts to a kind of medium level dosage of calorie restriction eventually, and our metabolism slows down, and so the body fat stops coming off as easily. But similarly, if we also try and stick with a super restrictive diet with a big dosage of calorie restriction, we do lose weight pretty quickly to begin with, but then we get higher cortisol, hormonal imbalances, our metabolism slows right down again. That's right. Despite trying even harder, nibbling on lettuce leaves for lunch, we are left feeling tired, hating everyone and everything around us, and cruelly no longer losing weight despite our best efforts. So to recap, when we try a medium dosage of calorie restriction long term, we get diminishing returns. We also can't cope with a high level of calorie restriction for very long. Think about it though, we could blast and cruise. We could blast at a high dosage of calorie restriction for a couple of weeks, then cruise at a much easier level of restriction longer term to keep on losing body fat. So let's look at a typical blast and cruise fat loss cycle. First, we're going to cruise at a low dosage of calorie restriction because if you haven't restricted calories before or in a while, doing a blast right off the bat is just masochistic and unnecessary. Let's first get your body and mind primed for fat loss. So calculate your BMR, your basal metabolic rate. I will put a link in the description for a calculator for that. Then deduct 200 calories. That is now your target daily calorie intake. Then calculate the calories in your regular breakfasts and lunches using something like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer online. And then we can use those figures to then guesstimate your dinner portions. Then we're also not going to snack between meals, and then we can still have a few managed indulgences at the weekend. So some takeout, some booze, and maybe a meal out. And we are going to cruise like that for 3 or 4 weeks. And you'll lose some body fat this way because you're going to be in a slight calorie deficit. But we can do a little bit more for a while. So we're going to have a blast for 2 weeks only before your metabolism catches on and adapts, before your cortisol levels tank, and before you get fed up and grumpy. And we do this by following the 16-8 protocol for intermittent fasting, essentially dropping one meal a day, probably breakfast, and having just an 8-hour window for eating. So you could break your fast at 11 a.m, then stop eating by 7 p.m. Stick to this over weekends too though. Remember, it's only for 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, you should have lost several more pounds of body fat. In my experience with clients, between 3 to 5 pounds. And now, although you may be tempted at the 2-week mark to keep surfing this fat loss wave forever, thinking you're a genius, you shouldn't, because you're about to start getting diminishing returns. Your body will start arguing, and it's going to become a pain in the ass anyway for you to stick with this any longer than 2 weeks. So we go back to Cruiseville. That means you can go back to eating breakfast again, or you can simply up your portion sizes at lunch and dinner and don't worry about any calories after 7 p.m. Fat loss will slow right down, but remember, this is part of the plan, because after another 4 weeks, you can do another 2-week blast. And this blast will work like a treat because your metabolism is running as if your cruise level of calories is the norm. So fat loss will happen immediately as soon as you start another blast, because you're increasing your dosage of restriction for just 2 weeks. And you can repeat this protocol for as long as you need to, eating pretty normally for 4 weeks, blasting for 2 weeks and losing another chunk of weight, then pulling out before your metabolism and your hormones start to suffer. So why does this work so well for busy guys over 40? We are talking about having 4 weeks of being okay with a ½ pound or a pound of fat loss per week. Then we ramp things up for 2 weeks to knock off another 3 to 5 pounds. Now, 7 to 10 pounds of fat loss every 6 weeks will add up very, very quickly. And most of the time, you're eating pretty normally, not having to give up the foods and drinks that you love either. And for me, 2 weeks of restriction is doable. Even if I'm sticking with Diet Coke on a night out instead of beer, or having to suck up some extra hunger, it is just 2 weeks. And by our age, I'm sure you can agree, we can suck up some extra discomfort for a couple of weeks. Because God knows after 40, the rest of our lives is pretty annoying already. We have a high tolerance for discomfort. But the devil is in the dose. A couple of weeks of being hungrier is doable when we know we have this hard stop after that. You can get back to eating relatively normally, albeit in a slight calorie restriction during the week. I hope that helps for you to lose some weight after 40. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. Let me know in the comments if that approach sounds doable to you as well. But I'll talk to you soon, mate. Take care.